Hello again. I hope you are enjoying your lunches. In just a moment, we're going to bring up our keynote panel here while you enjoy your lunch. I do hope you've had an energizing morning. There's been a lot of powerful sessions that I hope have sparked some great ideas. I'm short on my energy quotas of puns, so I just need to get those out there. Before we bring up our keynote panel, I just want to give a really big thanks to particularly our organizing committee. So Ray, Callie, Malika, Denny, Sarah, all of the folks involved. A lot of work goes into this. Not to mention our fantastic panelists and yourselves for coming all of this way. We really appreciate it. It's been a real pleasure to connect with you. So our keynote speech is Between Two Snake Plants with Todd Van Osdol. I jest, it's actually a subject that is near and dear to my heart, transitioning to midstream. So why don't you paddle on up here, Todd and panel, and we'll get started. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Katie, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're enjoying your lunch. So my name is Todd Van Osdol. I'm a senior consultant with our energy efficiency practice, and I'm pleased to be joined on the stage today with some experts here to share their experiences on midstream programs from a couple of different perspectives. So today we'll hear from Chrissy Thompson, program manager with AES Indiana. Chrissy has over 25 years of experience in the utility industry and brings a focus on a customer-centric approach to her work. And she'll be providing a utility perspective on introducing midstream programs to a portfolio. And next, we'll have Brendan Sotheby to share his experience launching new HVAC and food service midstream programs in the province of Ontario. Brendan's experience is shaped not only by his experience implementing programs, but also his work in a past life as a lighting distributor. So he'll be highlighting the role of the perspective of distributors and how they're important partners in our midstream programs. And then lastly, we'll have Jessica Ruggie from our channel delivery team that will provide kind of a macro view of midstream programs and how data can enrich relationships with key market stakeholders. Jessica's team provides a lot of launch support to our new programs, as well as managing national partnerships with larger distributors and manufacturers. And her team kind of collects and aggregates data that can help drive data-driven insights and program decisions. Before we get to our panelists, I do want to kind of set the stage a bit and give a little bit of a primer on midstream. And I'm curious with the audience, how many folks here have a midstream component in their portfolio? How many folks have a midstream program? Okay, so quite a few. For those of you who might be new to midstream programs, or at least to kind of so that we're on the same page, when we talk about midstream, we're referring to programs that aim to influence the sale of high efficiency equipment at the point of purchase, typically through a distributor, and primarily working through regional distributors and dealers to incentivize qualifying equipment through promotions, incentivizing the stocking of more efficient equipment so it's available upon emergency replacements or burnout, and also offering discounts that can be passed on to make more competitive sales to the contractor, passed on to the end-use customer. And so rather than accept applications and pay incentives on an individual participant basis, customer by customer, we aggregate bulk sales data and process that to the distributor that relieves that application burden off the customer. Midstream programs are an important component of a energy program portfolio because, well, I had a colleague once described midstream programs as kind of the sand in the marble jar, in that it fills the gaps in programs where you might have more difficulty reaching certain customers or missing out on influencing sales due to lack of awareness or other sorts of participation barriers that there might be. So midstream programs, for example, many small business customers struggle with the technical resources or awareness to participate in programs, or even just the bandwidth to fill out the application. And so a midstream program can work with the distributor to alleviate that application burden and provides a broader influence on sales in the market. The challenge, though, is that the gaps between those marbles are getting bigger, and midstream programs are taking on more of the burden of meeting portfolio energy program goals. And this is borne out in the data. You see that over the last 5 years, spending on midstream programs has grown over 20% year over year. So there's an increasing reliance on midstream programs to meet portfolio goals. And this is really just the minimum. The data set that I pulled here is referencing programs that have midstream in the name. There's many other programs out there that have midstream approaches that aren't explicitly expressed in the data. So, but overall, I think the trend is true, that we're seeing more and more reliance on midstream and influencing the supply chain to meet our goals. As the adoption of midstream programs has grown, midstream programs are also evolving to shifting baselines and LED standards or lighting standards, also accommodating new LED policy from the DOE, new ISA enforcement, and also a shifting focus on reducing peak demand reduction. And so we're seeing not only is our spending increasing, but where we're spending in midstream programs is diversifying to measures beyond just commercial lighting, which is kind of where it all started. We're seeing a lot more HVAC, a lot more food service, and a lot of programs that blend multiple technologies in a midstream approach. So as the adoption of midstream programs has grown, in this panel discussion, what I've asked our speakers to share with us is what this transition has meant for them, and provide their experience in how they transition to midstream, how do they introduce new measures, and share some of those learnings and what connections within those that supply chain and those stakeholders, and how does that lead to success within a midstream approach. So to start, I'll ask Chrissy Thompson with AES Indiana to start us off from a utility and program administrator perspective. Chrissy.
Thanks, Todd. And thanks to CLEAResult for having me here today to kind of share some of our midstream success story. We have highlighted here some of the benefits to the midstream program at AES Indiana, speaking primarily from the commercial and industrial side of things. The largest benefit is the hassle-free savings that's offered to our customers. So I come from the custom incentives background, and that's known for being one of the most challenging programs to participate in. With the application process, the spec sheets, calculations, W-9, all the things that can be a barrier to participation are essentially eliminated in this midstream program. So the participation in midstream does not require an application, in that our distributors contract with our partners at CLEAResult and offer the incentives as a point of sale discount. So that eliminates also the tax liability for anything over $600 in the other downstream and custom incentive program. The customer is issued a 1099 and has a tax liability. So in the midstream program, that is not a barrier for customers who may not want to have that tax liability. So that's one of the ways that supports those customers. And then also confidence. So with the partnership with CLEAResult, we're provided a program partner central portal for our distributors to enter the documentation and report the savings, but it also confirms the product's eligibility and DLC listing, as well as the customer's eligibility. In Indiana, we do have an energy efficiency rider opt-out law to deal with, and that database confirms both product and customer eligibility. And confidence for the utility, also our partners at CLEAResult do inspections. So we can confirm that the distributors are following the guidelines and have great relationship with our partners at CLEAResult. One of our most recent success stories is the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We're in the racing capital of the world, so it was kind of cool to learn that IMS had improved the lighting at the Speedway. They have, sorry, I can't see that slide from here, but they had earned a $364,000 incentive and saved the Speedway an estimated $215,000 annually on just the lighting alone. They are in the process of upgrading other facilities around the Speedway, such as the museum. But one of the great things about Midstream is not just lighting. I mean, it has been for us about 97% of the business, but we also offer HVAC and kitchen measures. So if you think about IMS's, race events, there are concession stands throughout IMS, so potential kitchen measures could be coming and other ways that they can participate there. So we have about 25 distributors, 18 lighting, and 7 HVAC. So yeah, those are the highlights that we have at AES Indiana right now. So.
I think on the next slide, there's you can see the transition, right, from a predominantly downstream-driven program to now a majority midstream-driven program in terms of savings. So, as you bring on those distributors, you see that in your savings as the portfolio evolves.
Yeah, they have increased from 32% in 2021 to 52% of the prescriptive savings have been midstream last year. So that's the increase. And we paid $5.1 million in incentives last year in midstream. So, all right, next up is Brennan.
Yeah, thanks. Got to go the other way, I think.
Yes.
There we go. Different being up here. Hi, Brennan Sotheby. I'm a program manager for a gas utility midstream program focusing on HVAC and food service measures. So not to go into the details of our program, but functionally we started with a gas utility focusing on underperforming measures. And we launched late 2019 going into 2020 and all the challenges that came with that. Functionally, we introduced a lot of variability to the program and we've continued to grow throughout. So we've actually added on another utility for a short period of time as a pilot program. So we launched with refrigeration measures on top of our existing food service gas cooking products for 2 years, introduced those, saw some pretty good success out of that pilot, and then sunset those measures and continued on with cooking products. We've seen a lot of change throughout COVID, through the impacts towards food service institutions and obviously HVAC institutions. But again, we've continued to engage those sectors and seen a lot of growth with them as well. So looking forward to next steps. Looking at the supply chains here, I want to highlight kind of 2 different approaches, whether it's HVAC and food service. It really doesn't matter what the supply chain is as long as you understand those market actors within the supply chain. So looking here on this slide, your traditional manufacturers, you have your distributors or dealers, and then your contractors who are educating end users ultimately. In a food service, you have a little bit more direct approach. You have your manufacturers selling to your dealers who are working directly with end use installers. So usually business owners, small business owners. What I really want to highlight out of this process is midstream, you're working with dealers and distributors, but you really see a lot more impact around those segments as well. So looking at this example, you may want to influence the dealers, but where we saw a lot of success was starting with the manufacturers. If you're trying to establish a value proposition or you're trying to get buy-in, trying to get soft introductions with a lot of those dealers or distributors, starting with a lot of their partnerships that they've had existing for years can really streamline the process. If you go to a manufacturer and establish a value proposition, they can make an introduction to those distributors and get the ball rolling without having to really build that up from scratch. Definitely a way to go about it. So from that, your distributors, your dealers, aren't just selling the products. They are partners in the whole process. So with that, you really have to engage them at all levels. So I mentioned making introductions with manufacturers. For us, we saw success starting at that C-suite level. You really need buy-in. You need someone that understands the value of the program and can really push it down to that branch level engagement. And that could be from a dealer or distributor that has 60 branches, or it could be a mom and pop shop who run it together and they have their nephew doing sales on the floor. You really have to tailor your outreach to be specific to those organizations to drive that value proposition. What helps do that is, on our program, seeing success, is allowing those dealers or distributors to keep a little bit of the incentives so that they can build up and they can improve their process while passing on discounts to their end users. We also like to identify a program champion, somebody that's going to stick with that organization that really understands the nitty-gritty details and can drive adoption. If you're starting at the C-suite level, they don't have time. Again, 60-person or 60-location branch or mom and pop shop, they are busy organizations. If you have someone that owns the process, they can really be held accountable and they can hold those salespeople accountable for driving those upselling efforts. And then you can see at the bottom of that pyramid, if I can read it, you have those manufacturer reps as well. So you've already established the value proposition. You've essentially expanded your influence with all of those manufacturer reps out on the road, talking about the products and helping those salespeople upsell as well. Not to steal Jessica's points for later. But finally, I want to touch on that it's an ongoing process. So again, for us, what we saw success with in that early phase is really establishing the fundamentals of the program. So ultimately, you want to get to upselling products and moving more of those high efficient boxes. But what you need to do is establish a baseline of the program with those organizations. If they don't understand the program, they're not going to give away money, and they're not going to be kind of held liable for promising a discount or going through those validation steps if they don't understand it. So you really need to establish that baseline understanding, get them used to the process, and then move on to a mature phase. You can focus on upselling efforts. You can focus on augmenting their existing processes. And then as the program progresses, you can focus on efforts like gamification. You can focus on reaching broader segments or using your historic data to try to target specific market actors, whether it's the mush sector or maybe sector-specific or product-specific categories. So you really get a breadth of knowledge that you can dig into your data, and it's a two-way conversation with those organizations. They're able to influence what the program is doing, and they have a voice in those sectors. I think we've seen a lot where we implement projects, and those market actors really don't have a say. They get told, here's what we're doing now. Well, as this conversation keeps on going, they're able to have a voice, and they can influence where those opportunities lie in the next steps. With that, I'll give it over to Jessica.
Thank you, Brennan. Jessica Ruggie with the Channel Delivery team here at CLEAResult. Channel Delivery supports, we're a shared services team that supports Midstream programs through our sharing operational excellence, KPI forecasting, and relationship management. So with our bird's eye view on Midstream programs across the company, we're able to help streamline new program launches and coach program teams on partner engagement best practices with the understanding that building those relationships is really critical to the success of a Midstream program. So taking things like Brennan was just speaking about that his team has developed and sharing those ideas and strategies with all of the Midstream programs across the company. We also provide training on the distributor portal, the program partner central, and offer a national lens on trends and best practices. Second, through our forecasting support, program teams can access our powerful and dynamic forecasting tool that leverages CLEAResult's wealth of data. A key component of our forecasting tool is its flexibility to take input from the field and adjust predictions accordingly. So really leveraging those close relationships that program teams have developed with the distributors, and getting that distributor feedback and inputting that directly into the forecast and adjusting accordingly. It's also a helpful tool for clients to see how their program is tracking on a regular basis. Finally, with our relationship management, like I've said, relationships are really key to the Midstream program's success. We, as a team at Channel Delivery, we leave the local relationships with the local program teams because those are really key. I feel like a broken record. They're key to the success. Really showing up in person at distributor locations and building those relationships locally is really important. So as a team, we really focus on the national relationships and help provide introductions at a local level when needed. And we share program performance information at a national level to key partners. And again, make connections across the company as needed. So looking at how we use data to drive decisions, we've created a Midstream Power BI dashboard that is accessible by all Midstream program teams here at CLEAResult to leverage for data-driven decisions. This is just a little snippet of the type of information that we have available. This is just an image, but it is a dynamic tool that you can click on things and hone in, and it's very dynamic and interactive. So what you're looking at here on the left is a utility level annual performance on a units per 1,000 household basis, as well as the diamonds are indicating average incentive being offered for two common HVAC products. So graphics like these can be utilized by program teams to track and enhance Midstream program delivery just by seeing what other programs are doing across the company and maybe following up with those different program managers and having conversations about what they're seeing and how it varies from their own program. The boxes on the right side of the screen indicate units submitted by manufacturer on the top and distributor on the bottom. So the larger the box size, the more products that have been submitted by those companies. And this information can help us determine which key stakeholders, who are the big players, and who should we be engaging at a national level. A key partnership we encourage all our program teams to develop at the regional level is with manufacturers of products that they are offering in their programs. Early engagement with manufacturers is really key. And it's really a mutually beneficial relationship between program teams and manufacturers. While their manufacturers are not the stakeholders that we are enrolling as program participants, we do see them as a key stakeholder as they can provide notice of upcoming products that we want to get on our qualified product list. They can provide valuable program design feedback and any notice of supply chain issues coming down the pipeline. And also introductions to regional sales teams. So Brennan mentioned this earlier, but just how to partner with those regional sales teams to get a foot in the door with their distributors. Much easier to go with someone that they know in the car and show up and introduce yourself than have to make those cold calls and really make the hard sales pitch. And in return, we can provide manufacturers with notification of upcoming new program launches, reminders to get their products qualified, tested, and on our qualified product list so we can be utilizing them in the programs. And if they're interested, we can provide them with a partner performance dashboard. So this is just a sample of a type of dashboard we would provide to a manufacturer partner. So it's showing activity across all CLEAResult Midstream programs, including things such as the top products, product categories by program, total units sold by a distributor, a summary of their top models, model numbers and what we're seeing coming through. And sharing this type of information gives us a lot of great talking points to engage manufacturers and have conversations with them and get them motivated to be more involved in the midstream programs. Couple things to point out, they can be a competitive bunch. So we have a list of top 10 manufacturers. In this sample, the blue, this particular manufacturer is kind of the number one that we're seeing in this space. If they see that they're number 3 or 4, they might want to try to get a little more engaged and get their distributors like, hey, what's going on? Why aren't you using these programs to sell our top-end products? Same goes with the distributor graph there, total units by distributor. If they're seeing that, Joe's HVAC supply isn't on this list, but they know that they're one of their top distributors, hopefully that will mean that they'll go talk to them, connect them with the regional program team, and get some traction going there. So sharing this data really helps us engage manufacturers and push the conversations to get more engagement with their distributors, and just kind of opens the door to a lot of great conversations.
Great, thank you, Jessica. So I think we'll now kind of transition into a bit of an open-ended Q&A here, and I have a couple of prompts. And I want to start off with the first question and ask the panel, when you're introducing a midstream program to a new market, say whether it's a brand new program or you're moving existing measures from a downstream program to a midstream program, what sort of groundwork do you need to lay for success? So what sort of messaging, because that can be an abrupt change for contractors or customers who have expected a downstream application process and have gotten used to it for the last so many years, and moving that program engagement to the distributor level. What kind of preparation did you do? How was that received? And any takeaways from that experience?
Yeah, so the transition at AES Indiana preceded me, so I kind of missed out on the full experience of how well that was received in the market, but I know it would take a lot of messaging for those existing trade allies that support your custom and prescriptive programs, but I know that there was a shift where they had to deviate from that expected distributor network back to the contractors to originally get the push to get it started. So I know that was something that they did face.
And did you have a similar experience, Brett?
Yeah, and so for our programs, we were actually given underperforming measures. So when we launched, prior to launching, they were slowly sunsetted with a lot of messaging out there, even though they weren't seeing a lot of adoption. And as part of our outreach, we identified those measures and worked with either dealers or distributors, really getting a sense of how much they participated in, say, legacy downstream products. Realistically, it wasn't very often. So we identified an opportunity for them to see growth and let them capitalize on that. We got the typical feedback of, why can't I keep more, or why can't I give more because this is how it was done? But we were able to offer the lens of, well, we're trying something new. Try it with us and see what we can do with it.
And Jessica, from a kind of a macro perspective, how are manufacturers engaged early on before program launch and in that kind of preparation phase?
Yeah, well, in some cases, they need to know that there's going to be a higher demand if it's a large program in a new sector. So just giving them that notification and awareness. And they're also happy to be engaged in kind of the early design decisions. They're always chomping at the bit to have a say there too.
Sure.
If I can add to that, and also proactively identifying if we're launching or wanting to do a spiff or an initiative and the supply chain isn't there. So we can proactively reach out and say, hey, we're looking at doing this. And they can say, well, actually, we can't supply the demand that might drive. So the last thing you want to do is put out an effort and then see your dealers, distributors can't get the product anyways. So we can get ahead of a lot of those issues.
Yeah, that makes me think there's been a lot of discussion the last couple of days about IRA, of course, and our customers, how do we make the process easy for customers, and how do we make the process easy for contractors? Do we have workforce constraints? But I haven't heard a whole lot about supply chain constraints. Is the equipment out there, and is it going to be available to install millions of heat pump water heaters and heat pumps? So have you guys heard any of that buzz with manufacturers and distributors? Do they see this coming? Or is this the calm before the storm?
Canadian, so I have no say.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
I think they definitely are getting ready and they're excited. Yeah.
And I was on a webinar with Hardy. Hardy's the national kind of distributor trade association, and they're clearly aware of it, but they're kind of waiting and seeing to see how things shake out. But they're expecting a phone call. They're expecting engagement from programs and utilities to see what role they play. So I think we certainly don't want to leave them out of the conversation, because they'll be a key part of making sure that the equipment is out there to satisfy the demand.
And I joked earlier, being in Canada, we may not be directly affected, but everything filters up from there, right? If all the demand is taken down here, we can't import those products. So we're definitely keeping an eye on that as well, and just trying to get ahead of any sort of implications.
Interesting. When you go to introduce new measures, if it's a brand new market, you were mentioning with manufacturers trying to just see if the supply is there. How do we go about forecasting the potential for a new program? What measures do you choose, and then how do you determine what sort of uptake might be available?
One of the ways that I learned the AES Indiana transition these measures was the highest performing measures in the downstream program were shifted to midstream, and just discussing with those distributors what was coming. That was how that was designed in Indiana.
So you're using more of a existing program data that kind of informs that. And Brandon, I believe you guys took a different approach. Instead of looking at the high-performing measures, you looked at what wasn't working.
That's right.
And whether it would work somewhere else.
Exactly.
So kind of two different approaches. Both can be right depending on
Yep.
your situation.
And we introduced it as a test. Go out there, let's try it, let's see what we can do. One of the biggest challenges we had was these organizations don't sell by efficiency. There's no toggle in the reporting that says, here's my Energy Star oven and here's my non-Energy Star oven. So we had to be very proactive, creating qualified product lists, breaking them down to a way that they understand, maybe by manufacturer or by SKU, and then going out proactively and saying, here's what we've identified. Do you sell any of these? What's the volume? And then maybe by percentage, where do you sell them high efficiency versus non-high efficiency? Because they just don't look at it by that metric.
Yeah.
So you have to be proactive and help them get there, help them take away that burden.
Right. And they may not speak our language in terms of how we look at products versus how they look at products, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Jessica, do you have anything to add on kind of what role the channel delivery team does with the forecasting? Sometimes we don't have an existing presence in that market, so it's a bit of a black box.
Yeah, I mean, one thing with our overview reach across the company is we can look at other programs and see what sort of rate we can expect that we've seen in different parts of the country, and marry that with things such as product shipment data, number of eligible customers, and kind of whittle your way down to a forecast from there. Yeah.
I want to see if there's any questions from the audience. Yes.
So you're trying to implement a midstream program for the distribution center.
I think you got a microphone right behind you.
I was just wondering, can you speak a little bit to, we're thinking about adding a spiff for the distributors. Do you have a sense of, is there a sweet spot we should be looking at?
Any sweet spiffs?
The higher the better.
How high does it have to be?
Of course.
Well, and I think to build on your question, a question of spiff, so something for the distributor, but also there's a question about how much of the incentive goes to the distributor versus how much gets passed through to the customer, and there's different philosophies on that, but I think that would be a good thing to elaborate on.
I think from our perspective, it depends on the volume of equipment going through as well. You know, if it's a high volume unit, you can reduce the spiff and then spiff based on units. I think being proactive, having those conversations with the dealers, distributors, segments, and understanding the value proposition for them goes a long way, right? That two-way conversation. Again, knowing they're going to ask for as much as they can possibly get, but having a level set and really looking at the volumes and doing the math to say, okay, here's the value proposition for the organization. If I had to put a number on it, $50 is the lowest level, but again, I think it depends on volumes and the measure cost as well.
Well, and I think it also might depend on what the distributor plans to do with that spiff. Is it going to directly incentivize the counter sales staff? Or is it going to get rolled into an administrative, cost compensation model that goes to the whole organization?
Great point.
And go ahead, Jessica.
I was just going to ask Brennan if you could elaborate on, you started with kind of one pass-through philosophy and then changed. Could you kind of speak to the differences?
That's right. So when we launched our program, we had no mandated pass-through, either in HVAC or food service. We really wanted to empower the dealers and distributors to take advantage of the program, knowing that it was entirely new for them, knowing that they would have to change the reporting structures, that they would have to allocate, a body, half a body towards the program. To really build up that value proposition, we needed to let them kind of use those funds. We called it kind of building a war chest in order to build up into the program. I think about, on the spot, 2 years into the program, with a lot of pre-notification, we implemented mandatory pass-through. We were launching a new measure, so we put in mandatory pass-through on that one measure, just letting them get their feet under them, figure out the reporting and identify any hurdles based on the feedback, and then put in market-wide mandatory pass-through on those measures. It kind of helped us from a program side of things as well, being able to proactively market a lot of those values and speak to them if we were doing trade shows or events. But definitely if I had to go back there, I might set that threshold right from the onset, just to make very clear messaging and develop that value proposition from a clear point.
Yeah, Brennan brings up a good point. If you know that incentive is going to be passed through, that opens up a marketing channel to the end users, where it's clear. You don't have to say you're going to get X dollars, but you're going to get up to, or kind of get creative with the language. But if there's no pass-through requirement at all, you might be hesitant to tell end users about it because they might not see it.
I called it the car dealership model, right? We've all heard the ads, up to $15,000 off a new Ford. If you wear a blue hat, red shoes, and a purple belt, nobody ever gets the $15,000. But if you can market an up-to value, it drives attention, gets somebody in the door to talk to their rep, right? Food service, HVAC, they all have their contact they go to ask about equipment, and then drive them back to those dealers, those participants, and let them handle the conversation from there.
Any other questions at the moment? I think with the concept of how we, I guess, how have you messaged the value proposition of a midstream program to end users? So, what does that marketing look like? What does that value proposition look like? In the different scenarios that you described about whether there's a pass-through or whether there's not, how do you do that balance? And Chrissy, maybe I can start with you.
Yeah, so we just launched a website last month, hosted at aesindiana.com for the Midstream program. It does list all the technologies, lighting, HVAC, kitchen, flyers, with those predetermined incentive amounts. We also list all the distributors in the network on the website as well, and the customer can, find a distributor, find the incentive amounts, and everything is available that way.
And you were describing to me in your small business program that it actually gets plugged into the small business program as well, correct?
That's correct. So our small business direct install program is sort of an initial engagement with an auditor team, and once they identify opportunities there, they will list out the Midstream program as a way for them to, gain additional savings and incentives through our Midstream program.
And do you find that you get more engagement from small business customers through the Midstream channel than you otherwise would in the downstream channel? Does that bear out in the data? I mean, I put up the fancy slide with the sand on the marble jar, but does that theory actually show up in your information if you're able to track that?
Yeah, so when I checked with our program coordinator, Liz, she said it was about 50-50 for downstream and midstream participation, so.
That's great.
So from my perspective, I don't get to see the final classification, but I do get to see a lot of the validations come through. And a lot of the feedback we've got now is that we are reaching a lot of those small businesses. Again, food service sector, from my understanding, right, the dealers operate on about 2-3% margins. We also learn a lot of end-use restaurants. I think it's about 80% fail within the first 5 years. These aren't businesses that have a lot of bandwidth to fill out applications. They don't have the resources to jump through a lot of hoops. And frankly, they don't have the money to buy premium, high-efficient equipment, especially through COVID. I know in Canada, we saw reports of upwards of 200,000 jobs were lost through the pandemic that never returned. So what we're looking to do, we've reached a lot of those small businesses, but we've also highlighted additional benefits beyond energy savings. Restaurants are short-staffed, so maybe we can highlight the automation that comes with a premium piece of equipment. Maybe we can highlight comfort in their kitchens. A more efficient piece of equipment isn't dumping out a lot of waste heat into that cooking space. So, if we learn and if we get that feedback that, they're driving up to the back door and saying, give me the cheapest thing you can so I can get it back and hooked up, maybe we can offer them something else beyond efficiency that will entice them to move over to those pieces of equipment.
I want to briefly hone in on something that Chrissy mentioned of having your list of enrolled distributors, publicly posted somewhere. That's a huge value add for those distributors. I was in a program where we actually printed out a list of enrolled distributors and mailed them to contractors. Like, go to these distributors to get these incentives. And then the distributors who were not so keen on joining were all of a sudden calling because their contractors are being sent elsewhere. So the marketing can work in so many different ways. Yeah.
We also offer co-branding. So in addition to having them on the website, they also get the flyers that we have prepared with their brand on it by our marketing department. Dominique is our marketing manager at CLEAResult and has done a fantastic job with it. But
so seeing like their brand next to
with
your
ours.
brand is, it's going to drive people to them.
And I think a strange nuance, at least for our marketing, is we drive, our marketing pieces go out, we drive them back to the dealers, not to ourselves, not for us to follow up on leads. We empower the dealers to take those conversations on. If we're at a trade show, at a Restaurants Canada show, we ask our first question, who do you buy from? Because they're probably in our program already. And then we give them resources to drive them back to those dealers to let them close out the sale, leveraging the relationships they already own.
So with all that work going into raising awareness to driving people in the right channels, empowering distributors, what does that mean? I'd like to use that as an opportunity to pivot to evaluation. So, how does that bear out in the evaluation process? In kind of from your perspective, the difference between evaluating, say, a downstream versus a midstream program where the points of influence are a bit different. How does that bear out in your relationship with the evaluator and the conversations you have up front to identify, to make sure you're kind of on the same page with kind of what the program goals and objectives and theory is?
Yeah, they evaluated the downstream and midstream program exactly the same. Our third-party evaluator, Cadmus, evaluated them the same, and there weren't any recommendations made on either program. So they evaluated well. They had one update of the Illinois TRM for our baseline wattage in downstream and midstream, but other than that, it was great.
And Brennan, your experience, was it similar in terms of the methodology, similar for downstream?
So we haven't gone through a full evaluation at this point. We did do a process evaluation, and one of the keynotes out of that was quantifying the qualitative was a key learning for us, right? We're out there speaking to a lot of dealers, manufacturers, distributors. How do we quantify the impact we're having out to the market? Trying to establish baselines with the dealers, distributors. Like I said, there's no toggle that says, here's my efficient versus my non-efficient. So we need to develop the relationships. We need to build that trust because we're essentially peeking into their books. You know, we're getting a sense of the entire market of what their sales are, and then we can leverage maybe some historical data to say, okay, based on our knowledge, hopefully we're tracking everything high efficient through the program. I know you've sold this. What percentage do you sell of the non-efficient? Again, trying to leverage relationships and then trying to build out that suite of data that we have access to help inform those end use case. If we can't get directly to the end user, we can show influence at that higher level. Jessica, any thoughts?
Nothing to add, really. Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions from the audience? All right. Yes.
Thank you. As you know, leading the energy transition activities, we're very interested in connected products. And I'm wondering, is there just an insurmountable barrier between Midstream and getting a connected device? Or do you see any opportunities for getting connected devices out there through Midstream and then pulling them into like a DR program?
Yeah. I'll first toss this to the panelists. If DR-enabled devices or connected devices come up in conversations with distributors.
There are a couple programs that have lighting controls measures, but it's a challenge to, you're capturing the sale, so they're being sold, but are they being actually turned on and utilized? That's a heavy lift on inspection, relying on inspections to ensure that they're being used as designed. So I think that's kind of a new thing that we're dipping our toes into and trying to figure out.
And I know with some of our programs, I think in particular in California, there's certain specifications for ADR-enabled HVAC equipment and things like that. And there's a trade-off between, on the one hand, speccing the equipment at the top of the funnel and making sure that's part of the qualifying product list, but then there's the bottom of the funnel where did that equipment get installed and can you follow through to the end user and follow on enrollment? And the trade-off is if you require enough end user information to follow that through to the end use and to the installation, is that information available to the distributor at the point of sale? And oftentimes it's not. And where it is, it can slim down the number of sales you can qualify. So there's a bit of a trade-off in quantity and volume. It's not that it's not there, but there is a bit of a trade-off. But one thing that's helpful, I think there is an opportunity to collect that information and utilize that for more, I guess, IDSM purposes, integrated demand-side management, and use that data as follow-on information. And tools like Program Partner Central help facilitate that mass aggregation of data at the distributor level rather than having to pull all that from individual contractor applications. So I think there's potential there. I think there's, at least in California, there's kind of separate funding buckets to facilitate that. But it's still kind of in its infancy. But I think there's a lot of room for innovation there, for sure. Any other questions? All right. Well, if there aren't other questions, I know folks have flights to get to. And I want to thank the AV staff for keeping us connected and engaged and heard. So thank you very much. And also to the staff of the line here for keeping us well fed and hydrated. I know that's been important this weekend. I don't see any of the staff here, but and thank you all for traveling long distances to come share your stories with us, share ideas. It's wonderful to see everybody in person, meet some familiar faces for the first time. That's been a big joy for me this week. So thank you for engaging with us and sharing your time and your ideas. And please safe travels home. And thank you again.